Thank you all for joining. Welcome to spring and welcome to the City Council meeting for March 21st. I apologize for running a few minutes late. It's 7:05. So why don't we call the meeting to order and start, as always, with pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carlson?
Here.
Councilmember Dottie?
Here.
Councilmember McKeithen? Here. Vice Mayor Lewis?
Here.
Mayor Whitmer?
Here. Okay.
Just going to go to the next job here. Starting today.
Ready to go? Okay. Next, we have a presentation on realignment. Oh, before we get started, I'd like to announce, if you're here for items 12 and 14, that we're going to pull those from tonight's agenda, and staff is going to rework those and provide some further analysis, and they should be back on the agenda for the April meeting, which will be held at Menlo College. Stay tuned for location details.
12 and 14, please.
12 and 14. They were on the consent item. So sorry for the last minute notice. So we have a presentation on realignment.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, city managers. My name is Tricia Sanchez. I'm the Assistant Sheriff for the San Mateo County Sheriffs. I'm here on behalf of Sheriff Greg Monks to give you an update on the state prisoner realignment, what took place when it went into effect October 1st of 2011, what's transpired since then, how it's affecting our local counties, and what the county has done to create a local implementation plan, which you have before you. I'm not going to go through all of that plan in detail, because just before you is the executive summary, and the full plan is very long, but I'll share with staff before I go to the website, the county website at the probation department. It has all the activities of all the meetings that we have done, and it has the full local implementation plan there. But I thought I'd start off with a little bit of history about how this realignment took place. It was for the state prison populations that have been severely overcrowded for several decades, and there was some litigation, prisoner litigation, that basically forced the state prison system to reduce their overcrowded system. There was a 3-judge panel called Coleman Plata. Actually, our sheriff was one of a few sheriffs that provided testimony about how overcrowding affects local jails, and the shift of prisoners that they were considering, how it would affect all of us. And then the budget situation hit, and some of the severe budget situations that the state was facing, and the governor's office kind of expedited the plan for the state prisoner realignment, which is basically the shift of the oversight and responsibility of certain populations, which I'll talk about in a minute. Sounds great. And then how the oversight, which currently those that fall into this category that were released into our counties that were supervised previously by state parole, how that shift of responsibility was to local county probation departments. So the components of realignment are 3 different categories. It's inmates that are categories, you've maybe heard about the 3 nons, non-violent, non-serious, non-sex offense charges, that previously, if you were arrested for those or any other, of course, serious charges, if you were sentenced to more than a year, you would go to state prison, because county jails were actually built to house people for up to a year. Usually the lower level charges, or depending on what the court would sentence them. And through realignment, what they decided to do is to make that shift and say, if these inmates that get arrested fall under these categories of non-violent, non-serious, non-sexual offenses, they would be eligible to serve their time in the local county jails, up to an indefinite amount of time. So you can imagine there's a lot of discussions and concern from the State Sheriff's Association, how are we going to deal with this population, because we weren't built for the systems to house people that long. We do have people housed for several years for pretrial. If it's a big murder case, they might be in our jail for up to a couple of years till it gets resolved, but then normally they'd be off to state prison. Also, another component of it is the parole violators. So if someone was out on parole and they violated their parole, they would come into our jail, the state would come in and do a hearing, and then they would be sentenced to go back to state prison to serve out their parole violation. Could be 6 months, could be a year. And we would send, we called it joint runs in the jail, so we would send many inmates to state prison on this. Well, what they changed is now they'll serve that time in a local jail. So that's 2 areas that affect us now, local jail. That those revocation hearings, those reoffenders on their parole revocations, now they could serve up to 180 days in our local jail. So that's another population that we're dealing with. And then the third one is the oversight with probation. It's called the post-release community supervision. So there was some people thought, geez, they're shifting all these inmates from prison and they're sending on a bus to our jail. That's not how it happened. What it is once they finished their state time and got released, as they were in the past, if they were a residency in San Mateo County, they would come back to our county. It would just be under the supervision of parole. Now it's under the supervision of the county probation department. So we get a list, and the county probation has had about 200 to 300 now, where they have to check in, sign up for this post-release community supervision, and probation staff now supervises that. I'll talk a little bit about some of the key components of the local implementation plan and some of the funding, but those are the 3 areas. Sentence longer and stay in our jails, the parole revocations, and then the supervision now that we're responsible for. What the state's thinking was, and the local sheriffs, we agree, we know this population, the majority of people that come incarcerated in our jail are members of our community. So it's not a huge shift that there are people that are returning that we're going to see them. It's just adequate staffing, adequate supervision to monitor and make sure we ensure public safety component of that. So what happened is all of the counties, and you have a template before you, all the 58 counties were tasked with coming up with a local implementation plan. How are we going to deal with this population, both in custody and the jail? We do a variety of inmate programs and services to change their lives and make opportunities for inmates that want to take us up on that. As you can imagine, not everyone in jail is compliant to those type of things, but that is our goal, to reduce recidivism. And so the concept is local jails, we're used to these inmates, we have the services both in custody, with our community-based providers, with our health and human services. So, okay, we should be able to work with this population, but the big concern was the dollars and the funding, because it's a huge component of it. The state told us we'd probably get at the peak of realignment, probably an increase in 250 inmates in our population in our jails. We kind of estimated, based upon the number that we used to send to state prison, that we wouldn't be now. We think it's more like 400. Since October 1st, since this took place, remember the state thought at maximum capacity it'd probably be 241. We're already at 303. Now, they're not all in the jail today, because some got sentenced, they did their time, maybe it was a split sentence, and they're out. Some of them are the revocations that up to 180 days, they might have completed their service time. And then there's those that are on the post-release community supervision from probation, and they have graduated sanctions what they can do. So if they're monitoring someone and supervising them, if they violate their probation, if they have a dirty test, if they do anything, the probation officers have the ability to do a flash incarceration is what it's called. Bring them back to county jail for a short period of time, get them back onto the supervision plan before they put them back out in the community. So the funding dollars was a big concern. We estimated just our costs, could be up to, $5 million a year based upon us being at peak implementation. That doesn't count the probation department, that doesn't count health and human services. So one of the things that the State Sheriff's Association, they're hoping to do is get codified into the legislation, fixed funding that goes along with this realignment. So for this first year, they're still working on that, but for this first year we have $4.2 million for the county. In the local implementation plan on the last page, you'll see the distribution of it. The sheriff agreed to pass for this first year because we knew it was going to take some time for this population to start, speeding up and really affecting us in the population. We are overcrowded. You've heard before we've been severely overcrowded in our men and women's facility. I think all of you are probably aware of the jail replacement project that has been going on even before, that was the plan even before realignment. Now it just kind of necessitates us to continue to move forward on that path. So the funding preliminary, it still has to go to the Board of Supervisors. So does the plan before you, still has to go to our Board of Supervisors. There's a Community Corrections Partnership that has been established. It's required by statute for each county to do that. We've all been working together, community-based organizations, faith, police, local law enforcement, probation, the courts, district attorney, private defenders program, and coming up with this plan. And then the fixed dollars. So it should be going to the Board of Supervisors in April. And once that gets approved, then the disbursement of all the funds for this year's funds would go through. We're anticipating, we haven't heard from the state budget formally yet, but we're anticipating it to increase and for us to get $10 million next year, which is good. Like I said, it's not going to probably be full coverage for all of our needs. Other thing, and you might be wondering, what is local law enforcement doing? So another component that local law enforcement is doing is we want to track this population with probation. We want to be able to monitor it. We want to know, are we seeing an increase in crime out in the communities because of the supervision component change from probation and because of the inmates that were in custody, and instead of going to state prison, they'll be with us and eventually come directly back out into the communities. So what they've come up for the public safety plan is several components. Utilize intelligence-led policing model. So we can work very closely with the probation department. We share lists of all these people. We know how many, and I'll tell you a little bit how many we've had in the different categories. So we've got funding in this plan to get a crime analyst just dedicated for this, to work with all the city, local law enforcement agencies in the county and with probation, so we can adequately track and staff, and we can deploy our resources appropriately out in the community. Also, we're a big kind of arm to work with probation department, because the law enforcement officers on the street, they pull a car over, the person is on post-release community supervision. We want to make sure our officers have the right information so that they know if they stop someone for a violation or if there's an issue, are they compliant with their rules of probation. If they're not, obviously they can call the on-call probation officer, make an arrest, of course, for any new charge, but we want to make sure we keep a tight handle on this group so we can ensure public safety. So that's one component. And then the other is information sharing and then training. So we want to make sure we train our officers so everybody understands what's the components of realignment, what is probation's role, what's the law enforcement role. Also, we hope, of course, the whole thing of this is embracing, different ways of dealing with this population in the jail, evidence-based programming. We have a lot of different programmings, but we want to make sure we're investing when inmates are in our jail. We want to make sure they have the best opportunity for success. So we're doing a lot of things there, but also for the law enforcement with this training, we want them to know that on some people, if they're doing well with probation, we don't want to conflict and basically over-supervise someone. We don't want to be going on visits and home visits too much, where, some people, they need to have a little bit of trust and opportunity to change, but some need a little bit more law enforcement engagement. So we know we need to provide some training for our officers. So that's kind of a multidisciplinary approach. We also want to have multidisciplinary teams in the jail and out in the community for some of the population risk. Just to give you some factoids of the population. So state prisoners usually recidivate about 70%. County jails is 65 range. So we all understand we can do a better job. It's a very complicated and difficult system, problem to address. But also we know that when we're dealing with them, out in the community as well, so that they understand the resources that they have available to them. So what the county did collectively is have a service connect. So right now, when any inmate that gets released from state prison and they're bound to come to San Mateo County, they come report to probation department on the 5th floor of the Hall of Justice. And then after they complete that first meeting with them, they do a warm handoff. So they walk them down to across from the Board of Supervisors on the 1st floor of the Hall of Justice. There's an area called Service Connect. And so that's where we connect them and understand what are your educational, vocational, what are your support needs you have, and we can at least get that into place. Inside the jail, the sheriff we're using a consulting firm. We needed to do this anyway. It was the plan because we're building our new jail. But we wanted to review all the programming that we have inside our jails. And then we want to look, because we're building a replacement facility, the classification risk, more gang members and people that we're dealing with. We want to look at our system so we can have kind of a continuum strategic plan, almost like a college curriculum course opportunity for for those inmates that want to participate, and we can make a difference on, when they first come in our facility, they get an assessment tool. We do a classification security assessment on them. They get medical and mental health, but we want a full assessment, you know, to review their criminogenic needs so we can match up the type of programming we want to put them in while they're in the jail. And then we want to do that warm handoff, whether it's in one of the sheriff's transitional facilities, on the Maple Street complex. We have a variety of programs we've started there, whether it's on 50% of our sentenced inmates. The sheriff has them out on our sheriff's work program. So we do a lot already with programming. But we want to see what are the best practices out there. So we have a consulting firm that worked on this local implementation plan. They know the county well, they know the partners, and we're utilizing them to enhance our program services inside the jail as well. So that's kind of the update that we have so far. I don't want to go too long, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has.
I guess the main question is the funding for the incremental housing of the prisoners. Is that going to be, is the state going to provide that, you think?
Yeah, what the funding does is we used to, when we housed state prisoners, we would get a reimbursement of $77 a day per inmate. That stopped because we got the state realignment funds. So that $4.2 million, a portion of that is for the housing and incarceration jail beds for the sheriff's office, for that component. Now our sheriff this current year, because it happened October 1st, our population, even though it's overcrowded, we weren't totally bursting at the seams yet, so he wanted to make sure, you know what, I think I'll be okay this first through June 30th, which we're approaching now. Our jail is rated, current jail is rated for 688. We usually have about 750 to 800. So far, we're pushing, getting close to 900. After we get to 1100, we need to, you know, reopen the camp. We need to do some other things. Next fiscal year, for the realignment dollars, it's supposed to increase to 10%. So they're coming up with a funding model of how the proportionate share will go to the local law enforcement, so the sheriff's office will get a big component of that. But it won't be a fully match to match. It'll probably be like, you know, 40, 50%. The state isn't giving full funding to anybody, really.
I just want to know, what percentage of your inmates and recidivism is due to drugs?
The majority have some sort of co-occurring issue, whether it's drug dependency, mental health. So I won't say with everyone that's the entire factor, but majority of our male and female population do have some sort of substance abuse. But they're not in there solely for drug charges. Many of them are in there for, obviously, other charges, serious or violent charges. So
I have a few questions. We talked about the finances, or lack thereof, and the overcrowding, and how many people are going to be brought in for 4 months. You have 66 additional inmates. But what is the sentiment or the policy behind this transition? Is it to enable people who are less violent offenders to be with other less violent offenders, even if the term is beyond the 1 year, so that they don't go into bigger and better illegal activities? Is that one of the motivations for this? I mean, what is...
Well, it wasn't something that we volunteered for, so this is something that the state, of course, passed. And the concept is, though, that, of course, with adequate funding, you know, we hope that to make it successful. But their concept is that the low-level offenders on this category, they were forced to reduce the bottom line is they were forced to reduce their state prison population by 40,000 inmates, and they actually have done that now. They've actually started this in different programs over time, but the biggest part was this October 1st realignment. So that was the state's goal. And then behind that, they feel that, well, these are returning to your community. The counties are very competent in being able to provide for, house, and provide the services and support for them. Probation should be able to provide the local supervision. That was a concept from the state. It makes sense in concept. The State Sheriff's Association agreed to it in general concept, realizing that it is going to put a lot of burden, but a lot of their concerns have been overcrowding, the funding, is the funding going to be there? We want to get, the State Sheriff's Association wants to get that constitutional amendment to guarantee funding for continued years going through. So, you know, it's definitely a challenge for me and my staff working in the jail. We have the prison gang element now that's coming in to our populations. And You can't imagine, we don't have the ability to rec, each pod holds up to 96 inmates. Usually we'll rec half of that pod, one deputy or one correctional officer. Usually it works fine, but when we have competing rival gang members, when we have more sophisticated inmates or individuals, then it's more challenging. So we have to look at doing things a little differently as well with this population to be successful.
Then funding, Jerry, of course, asked you the question about the continued funding. This is, the 4.2 million is for the 9-month period.
Just for this current fiscal year.
What do you realistically expect might be your shortfall in funding?
Well,
And
for us,
how are you going to deal with it?
Sure, if we were at peak, we anticipated our jail needs, our funding needs would probably be between $5 or $6 million if we were at the peak, to be able to house all the inmates, do all these different things. Now so if you think of next year, 10 million, we're already, if we were to get 100% of that, which the board probably isn't going to do, that would take up 50%. Now, where's the other money for probation and the other service providers? So that's why they're coming up with a criteria-based, okay, how much should we allocate for local law enforcement and probation? How much should we allocate for the service providers? How much should we allocate? The court and district attorney's office have their separate pot of money. So,
But do you really think you're going to get 100% financing for this? No.
I don't
So
think
how
so.
are you going to deal with the shortfall?
Right, we just have to deal with it within our general funds. The other part of it is they hope we'll be more creative and we'll be able to, by doing different creative evidence-based things and doing different things with our alternative sentencing programs. The sheriff does have more authority in this to utilize with the court electronic monitoring, so they're hopeful that if we also do different things, maybe we'll reduce the amount of people that would be incarcerated, thus maybe reduce the funding needs. But
Yeah, it's sort of,
so it's
that's a ball that once it starts rolling, where does
Right.
it stop and what are the consequences?
right.
And then my final question is, you mentioned that 50% of your inmates are on a work program. What kind of work program? And does any of that mean that more of them would be out at Marsh Road and 101 cleaning up all that litter that we have?
Well, we have what is called an alternative sentencing bureau. So for those inmates that are sentenced, and they can apply in our classification unit reviews, what's their risk need, and obviously it's more of a low-level type of offender, non-violent. We'll put them either in, if the court orders it, electronic monitoring, but the largest pool is our either sheriff's work program or work furlough. So the difference is sheriff's work program, they come up, we have a supervision team, and we'll take them to clean up a particular area. And cities can respond to any cities if you have a need, baseball field, anywhere, you can call the sheriff's office, our alternative sentencing bureau, and we can put it on the list and help supplement DPW or anyone if they have any extra needs. We will do that and we'll schedule it in. And then our work furlough is that people will stay at night with us in custody and they'll just go out to their job and work. And then we also have culinary and other programs in our transitional facilities where the work furlough works out of. So they get programming during the after hours for their work and they'll go out to their job. And we also work and bring in vocational training. We've led to many people. We have a TAILS program where we actually have unadoptable dogs, a partnership with Peninsula Humane Society, inside our Maple Street complex, our transitional facility. And the inmates get matched up with the dogs. SPCA is an 8-week program. It helps provide
Mutual stability.
It creates empathy for these individuals. They have graduation certificates. Sometimes they've never even graduated hardly anything. They get GED programs, and then when they get out of custody, the dogs are much more adoptable. So we've had a very good, other than sheriff's office staff adopting most of the dogs, we have had a couple of inmate handlers that have gotten out, and they are the families that have adopted the dogs. So we try and also do some other creative things for long-term success. We have connections with some restaurants because we have a full culinary program now for our transitional facilities, so they get culinary training, so maybe they can start working in some of the restaurants. So.
Okay. Well, if I can make a request through our police chief, 101 Marsh Road, it's the worst intersection I see on 101, so that would be nice to have some work detail there. Thank you for all the information and your work.
And just one question, and it would be, I guess, really for both our chief and as well as Sheriff Sanchez. As we're doing all this work study and work release, obviously, what sort of interface, we're not part of the sheriff's environment here. We have our own private police force. And can you just speak very, very briefly on the interchange and the exchange of information that we have, so that as the inmates graduate or they're on work release type of programs, that our force here as well as in Menlo Park, you know, how they get informed and how our communications and identification information syncs up.
Sure. Chief, would you like me to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have a variety of opportunities where that can take place. The main big one is we have a San Mateo County Commanders Group. And that's made up of all the police agencies in the whole county that have command staff, lieutenants, some sergeants, some captains, and they all report out on their various areas and functions and responsibility. We have zone commanders. You've heard of the successful regionalization and gang task force and the narcotics and vehicle theft task force. So we have a lot of things in play that have that synergy and opportunity to share information. So they have that. I just presented realignment to that group. And then through the probation department as well, we have probation staff embedded within some of the gang task forces. Some of these operations might end up leading to being tasks for the gang task force members, where we have the bulk of regional law enforcement officers that can go out and do some of this follow-up work as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from anybody in the audience? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comments, and I believe we're starting public comments out with a discussion of high-speed rail, which is not going to be limited to any time limit, because we want all that great data.
But I just make one comment. Bill Warren, who's going to be making comments, has been working with William Grinley and Alan Enthoven, hand in glove on high-speed rail for quite a while.
Great.
Hi, I'm Bill Warren. I'm a resident of Palo Alto, but I'm part of the William Grinley, Alan Enthoven gang, troublemakers. So William is in Washington, D.C. right now. On Tuesday, he gave a presentation to the GAO about high-speed rail. I'll talk about that in just a second. So I'm here in his stead, and tomorrow I'm giving the same presentation to the GAO in Sacramento, because they have a team in Sacramento right now. So that's kind of the context of why I'm here and why William is not here. There's 4 points I want to go through quickly. This is really to make sure you have received information that we think you've gotten. First, William sent out a document called an analysis of local transit agencies' use of high-speed rail funds. And I understand you should have gotten those. If not, get to Teresa and I'll get you copies. The important message in there is that the $9 billion that was set aside for high-speed rail money, we believe is going to be very difficult to get shoehorned into monies to be spent on the peninsula here or in the LA Basin. We've talked to a number of attorneys, and there's going to be, if they try to take some of that high-speed rail money and use it on the peninsula, there's going to be a bunch of lawsuits. I'm quite sure. Mr. Brady will probably be in the middle of one of them. So, but it's good reading if you try to. We're going to have to wait and see what the new business plan says, and the new business plan is supposed to be out in less than a week, maybe as early as Monday or Tuesday of next week. So we'll have to see what's there and what is not there. But there's going to be a lot of wheeling and dealing on everybody trying to get their hands on some of this $9 billion, which is really supposed to be for high-speed rail, not for the peninsula or the LA Basin. That's one point. Point two, there is another document that we just put out that you should have also gotten, which really talks about the fact that there is going to be a need for an operating subsidy probably forever. And a lot of people have talked about this. We've been digging and digging at this issue, and we have found two things. One, we have found data that pretty well proves that their promise of profitability is a false promise. It just isn't going to happen when you add up the numbers. Secondly, I believe, from what I saw, the High-Speed Rail Authority has known this for over a year. Yet they put out business plans saying it's going to be profitable. So this was one of the discussion points that William had with the GAO in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. It's one of my discussion points tomorrow with the GAO in Sacramento. So it's going to be interesting how this all plays out, but it's more than just the numbers don't add up. They don't even talk about what they know when they should have talked about it. So this is going to be an interesting story. Stay tuned. So that's the next document, and that's the one called The Authority Knows Their Proposed High-Speed Rail Will Need a Subsidy Forever. Okay, that's awesome. Now, both of these documents are on the www.cc-hsr.org website, and you're welcome to take a look at those. That's the second item. Third item, there is another document that is not on the high-speed rail website, and that is effectively a report we did for the GAO. William delivered his copy to Washington 2 days ago. I'm delivering our copy to Sacramento tomorrow. This has 41 points in it of issues that are either illegal or at least inappropriate in terms of what's been going on over the last couple of years. And it basically enumerates a lot of things. For example, the issue about the fact they not only need a subsidy, but they've known about it for over a year is one of the 41 points in here. So, but that is not on the website, and I don't think it will ever make it public because it was really something that was done for the GAO. But I understand that Teresa got it, and you should also have an email copy of that. Okay, so those are the 3 data points. The 4th data point is that on item 16 that you have coming up on your agenda is a request for you to support 2 bills that are coming through the legislature soon. That's AB 1455 and SB 985. That's the Harkey bill and the LaMaffa bill, and I would encourage you to support them. It would be unbelievable if they passed, but we have to keep the pressure on the legislature to make them to vote to say no and not let it get out of committee, because that's really what happens. They kill it in committee, the Democrats kill it in committee, but we just have to keep pressing and pressing and pressing, because these kinds of things that are now that are being dug up as it relates to what the authority is doing and what the legislature is letting them do becomes kind of an interesting quagmire when they then vote to not stop things that should be stopped. So we'll see where that takes us. So in the midst of all that, I was just doing some calculations, listening to the discussion about the sheriff's issues and the $5 million. The current burn rate at the authority on a daily basis is $600,000 per business day, and we are not shoveling any dirt, and we're not building any track. We just got a bunch of consultants and contractors doing their thing. So just put that in perspective with her issue. So, comments, questions?
Thank you for your work.
Mr.
Yeah, I'm still interested in finding a way to have Caltrain be electrified and, run to, say, San Jose, where that would not mean that we would have 60-foot burns here. And one of the things I've never seen addressed is there are ways to electrify tracks without overhead pylons. And I'm wondering if anybody's really looked at that, because it can be done safely. It's done in Japan and Europe, and I think that might be acceptable. I don't know. It might be acceptable to the peninsula residents if they had high-speed rail, more or less, but using Caltrain tracks without building any new tracks and have it electrified. Do you know anything about that?
I honestly don't know anything about that. I've been very involved in the finance, but not in, let's call it, the operational issues. Your point is one of many points that keeps getting rattling around, which is, if high-speed rail doesn't ever happen, what are the options that Caltrain has? They do nothing and just continue with what they're doing. Do electrification overhead, and I guess what you're saying, maybe there's another option of electrification, let's call it at grade or something.
Yeah.
And they all have different, you just think about it, they all have different operational needs. If you do it at grade, then you have to secure the right-of-way. You can't have live wires down there where people are walking over them. So all of a sudden, things change dramatically. But the first, I guess, from my point of view, I'm trying to take it from a state point of view and saying the first thing we have to do is we have to kill the big bear in the room. And we get that done, then we can start dealing with our own problems in our ordinance. But your point is, I think, very valid. I don't think anybody's looked at it. I think they have a bug in their ear about electrifying, and they they won't come off at that point. And that's kind of where they are.
There hasn't been a discussion on diesel technology, which has changed.
Fine.
There hasn't been a discussion on diesel technology, which has changed substantially too. The Caltrain people haven't even had a discussion about it nor let it, but they've already charged it down the path. They keep talking about electrification as if they've already, all this stuff is off the table.
Yes, I agree with
It's
that.
all because they see high-speed rail, high-speed train to be the money train to provide them the funds. But your point here, Mr. Mayor, is that these other sources of power could be implemented at half the capital cost. The electrification that the plan that they have now, less maintenance costs to the corridor on an annual basis, and still have the same kind of environmental and operating benefits as they're counting for electrification.
Anything else?
Any other questions? But thank you for all the work that you do, as well as, William and Alan. You guys are doing a great job, and you're keeping us all very well informed.
Thank you. Okay, nice. Let's leave it. Thank you.
So now we will continue on with public comments. I'll remind you that public comments are for items that are not on the agenda. And there is a time limit that Teresa watches over like a hawk. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Widmer, honorable city council members. My name is Davina Gentry, and I'm here on behalf of Actera's High Energy Homes Program. I am the outreach coordinator, and I wanted to address you this evening to make residents in town aware of the program if they aren't already aware of the program, and to share some of the successes that we've had, because we have a month left to enroll Atherton residents in this energy saving program that's been sponsored by the town. The High Energy Homes program uses your PG&E smart meter data, and by answering a